The invitation landed in my mailbox not as a guest invite, but as a business contract. The envelope was emblazoned with catering agreement, Palmer 40th anniversary gala in sleek, bold lettering. I already knew what it held before I opened it. I'm Charlotte Palmer, 35, one of Boston's top chefs. My restaurant man boasts 2 Michelin stars and a 6-month waiting list. But to my parents, I'm the child who chose cooking over law school, the one who brought shame to their name. The contract was standard: number of attendees minus 200, dietary preferences, and a predictable menu. My mother's signature was already on it, accompanied by a note in her meticulous handwriting. We expect flawless execution, Charlotte. Don't embarrass us. I set it aside, next to a letter from my grandmother's attorney. I'd been avoiding it, but something today urged me to face it. I tore open the seal and read. Dear Miss Palmer, as the executor of your grandmother Eleanor Palmer's estate, I'm pleased to inform you that you have been named the sole heir to both her estate and her shares in Palmer Industries. I had to read it again. My grandmother had left everything to me, not to my father, not to my flawless sister, but to me. The house, the vineyard, her stake in the family business. Everything my father assumed would be his was now mine. A ping from my phone broke my reverie. Have you looked over the contract? We need a response by tomorrow. Your father insists man cater the event. Even though they refused to dine at my restaurant, they still wanted my name attached to their event to impress their guests. I thought about all the family functions I'd been excluded from, all the subtle ways I'd been made to feel inferior. I typed, I'll do it. Send me the guest list, and I'll handle it. Excellent, my mother responded. Nothing too avant-garde. These are sophisticated people, Charlotte. The guest list arrived, pages of Boston's elite. My name wasn't on it, of course. I was merely the hired help. Later that evening in my office at Maine, my sous chef Marcus knocked. Hey, boss, everything all right? You've been staring at that letter for over an hour. A plan started to take shape in my mind. Remember that pop-up idea we discussed? The one with interactive tables and performance elements? Marcus's eyes lit up. The dinner theater concept, but you said it was too risky for Maine. It is, I smiled. But I think this is the perfect event to test it out. Your parents' anniversary? Marcus asked, uncertain. I handed him the letter from my grandmother's lawyer. His eyes widened as he read. Charlotte, this changes everything. It does, I replied. Call the team. We're going to give my parents an anniversary they'll never forget. In the weeks leading up to the event, I immersed myself in planning. I hired performers, designed tables with built-in screens, and crafted a menu that told my story. My mother called daily, scrutinizing every detail. Charlotte, the Hendersons are vegetarians. Can you manage all these dietary restrictions? Don't worry, everything's under control, I reassured her, while secretly making plans for something completely different. 1 week before the event, my sister Margaret showed up at Maine during dinner service. She stood at the front desk, immaculate in a designer suit, looking down at the restaurant. We need to talk about the anniversary party, she said. I led her to my office. What's going on? Mother's concerned you might try something too unconventional. She's heard rumors about some of your experimental dishes. This has to be a proper event, not one of your artistic statements. I smiled, thinking of what I had in store. Tell her not to worry. This will be exactly what this family needs. Margaret left, suspicious but quiet. As I watched her walk out, doubt crept in. Was I really going to go through with this? But then I remembered all the times they'd made me feel lesser. Yes, I was. The day of the event arrived. The Four Seasons ballroom had been transformed into my vision. Interactive tables, projectors, a custom sound system. It was perfection. My mother arrived for the final check. Charlotte, what are all these screens? This looks more like a tech conference than an anniversary dinner. Trust me, Mother, I said. It's all been meticulously planned. The guests began to filter in, dressed to the nines. My father, in his custom tux, welcomed them, while my mother accepted compliments in a designer gown. They were every bit the power couple they strived to be. At 6:30, my mother tapped her glass. Before dinner, we'd like to thank all of you for being here to celebrate 40 years of marriage. And of course, we must thank our daughter Charlotte for catering tonight's meal. A polite applause followed. I noticed my mother didn't call me her daughter, just Charlotte. I emerged from the kitchen, nodding to the guests. My father didn't even glance in my direction. Margaret, sitting at the family table, shot me a disdainful look. The first course arrived, heirloom tomato soup. As the bowls were placed before the guests, the tables lit up. Projected images flashed of family dinners where I sat alone at the counter, holidays spent in the kitchen instead of at the table. My mother's face tightened, but she remained silent. "This soup," I said, "is made from tomatoes grown in my grandmother Eleanor's garden. The garden where she taught me how to cook, while the rest of you were too busy to notice me." The second course, seared scallops, revealed more secrets. The tables displayed images of my culinary school graduation, a day my parents hadn't attended, along with clips from Man's opening food critic reviews and my first Michelin star. "Your scallops," I said, "are paired with a wine from Eleanor Palmer's vineyard." I took a moment, carefully watching my father's reaction before explaining. "The vineyard, the estate, and the shares in Palmer Industries. Everything was left to me in my grandmother's will." A heavy silence fell over the room. My father's face lost all color, and my mother froze, her glass of wine suspended midair. "What'd you just say?" my father demanded, suddenly rising so forcefully that his chair screeched across the floor. Mr. Harrison, the attorney, cleared his throat. "Your daughter is correct, Mr. Palmer. Your mother's will clearly states that the vineyard, the estate, and her 30% controlling stake in Palmer Industries were all bequeathed to Charlotte." A quiet buzz spread through the ballroom. My father's associates exchanged glances, fully grasping what this meant. It gave me considerable influence over the company he had built. "This is absurd," Margaret exclaimed, her composure finally cracking. "Why would grandmother leave everything to her?" I gave a slight smile, signaling the servers to bring out the next course. "Because, Margaret, while you and Dad were consumed with the business, I spent every Sunday with her, cooking, listening to her stories, and sharing her love for food. She saw me in a way none of you did." The main course, an exquisite ribeye steak with truffle butter, was placed before us. I showed photos of my grandmother and me in her kitchen, laughing as we cooked together, a picture from her last Christmas, when she insisted on having dinner at my restaurant, and the day she tasted my food for the first time, tears welling up as she told me how proud she was. "Your meal tonight," I said, keeping my tone calm, "includes vegetables from Eleanor's garden and wine from her vineyard. She always said that good food brings people together, but only if they're willing to sit as equals." My father stood motionless, his face twisted in anger. "Charlotte," he growled, "we need to have a word right now." "No, Dad," I responded evenly, "it's all been decided. The documents were signed this morning. But don't worry, I'm not going to run the company the way you did. I believe in giving people the chance to prove themselves." The meal proceeded in tense silence, broken only by the faint whispers of the guests. My mother barely ate. Margaret glared at me, while my father aged before my eyes. When dessert arrived, my grandmother's deconstructed apple pie, I made one final declaration. In honor of my grandmother's legacy and her belief in nurturing talent, I'm establishing a scholarship program. The Eleanor Palmer Foundation will provide funding to aspiring chefs who, like me, might not fit the conventional mold but have the passion and drive to succeed. I watched as the guests processed my words. This wasn't just about money or shares. It was about rewriting the narrative, offering opportunities to those overlooked or dismissed. The evening ended abruptly as people made polite excuses to leave. Once the last guest was gone, my father approached me, his face ashen. "You've destroyed everything," he whispered. "Was that your plan, to humiliate us in front of everyone?" I met his gaze steady. "No, Dad, my plan was to show you what you've missed, the things you've thrown away because they didn't fit your perfect idea of this family." The news of my parents' anniversary party spread fast among Boston's elite. The headlines were everywhere. How Charlotte Palmer, the outcast daughter who became a chef, inherited everything and revealed it on her parents' anniversary night. The next morning, I sat at my office at Mann, reviewing the paperwork Mr. Harrison had prepared. The ownership transfer was complete. I now controlled my grandmother's estate and held significant influence over Palmer Industries. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Margaret, ranging from threats to desperate requests for reconciliation. My mother's messages alternated between guilt trips and attempts to discuss family matters. But it was my father's email that grabbed my attention. "Charlotte, what you did last night was cruel. You embarrassed the family and might have damaged the company I built. If this was revenge, then congratulations, you've succeeded." I read it twice, then replied, Dad, this wasn't about revenge. It was about showing you what you threw away, not just with me, but with your own mother. While you were focused on building your empire, you missed what was happening within your own family. Grandmother saw that. That's why she made her choice. I don't plan to harm the company. Unlike you, I believe in giving people chances. Come to Mound tonight at 8 if you want to talk about the future. To my surprise, he showed up. I watched from the kitchen window as he entered the restaurant, clearly out of place. He had never been to Man, never tasted my food, or acknowledged my success. I led him to a private room where I prepared a simple meal, his mother's recipes, the comfort food she used to make. As he sat down, I noticed how worn he looked. Your grandmother, he said after a long silence, staring at the bowl of beef stew. She used to make this every Sunday. I know, I said quietly. She taught me. She told me stories about you while we cooked. How you loved this stew. How you'd help her before the business overtook everything. He took a bite, his hands trembling slightly. It tastes just like hers, he whispered. She wanted you to have more than just the business, Dad, I said softly. She wanted you to remember what it felt like to care about something beyond success and status. That's why she left everything to me, not to hurt you, but to make you think. Over the next 2 hours, we talked more than we had in years. He shared how he had dreamed of becoming a chef before his father pushed him into business. I told him stories of grandmother he never knew, moments he missed while chasing his version of success. I don't expect forgiveness, he said as the evening came to a close. What we did to you was wrong. I'm not looking for apologies, I replied. I want real change, starting with how Palmer Industries treats its employees and values success. He nodded slowly. How do we make that happen? First, we properly establish the Eleanor Palmer Foundation, not just for culinary scholarships, but for programs to support employees' children, small businesses, and community outreach. Then, we need to look at the company culture. No more promoting people just because they fit a mold. To my surprise, he didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Will you teach me?" "Teach you what?" I asked, confused. "How to cook," he said, his voice almost shy. "Your grandmother's recipes. I want to learn." That was 6 months ago. Every Sunday, my father comes to Man early before we open. We cook together, and sometimes he shares stories about his mother I'd never heard. Margaret eventually came around, especially after I offered to teach her too. She's surprisingly good with pastries, though she never admits it to her friends. My mother took longer to adjust, but now she even joins us on Sundays. Last week, she asked me to teach her how to make grandmother's apple pie. The Eleanor Palmer Foundation is thriving. We've funded scholarships for 15 aspiring chefs, and our community programs are making a real difference. Palmer Industries is changing too, slowly but surely, becoming a company that values more than just profits. As for me, I'm still running Man, still creating. But now, when I look out into my dining room, I sometimes see my family there, enjoying my food and being part of my world. It's not perfect, we still have our moments. But last night, as I watched my father carefully chop vegetables in my kitchen, his tie tucked into his shirt to keep it clean, I realized something. The greatest revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. Sometimes it's about giving them the chance to change, to see the world differently, and to taste what they've been missing. My grandmother understood that. That's why she left me her legacy, not to divide us, but to give us a chance to come together again, around a different kind of table. Man's menu still features the tomato soup from that anniversary dinner, but now, beneath it, there's a note. From Eleanor's garden, where every meal tells a story and every story deserves to be heard. It's become our most popular dish. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay amazed.